Big Biz Show, bigbizshow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Big Biz Radio. Speaking of websites, OriginOil's website is originoil.com. They're a publicly traded company. Their stock symbol, OOIL. Riggs Eckelberry, our guest today, with speaking about their innovative technology, helping make it possible to clean and reuse our most precious resource, water. Riggs, before I get into the waste side of your business, you and I talked earlier about that crazy article came out last week saying we've got a year's left water here in California. Now, I realize that we broadcast nationwide here. That's a pretty interesting tenet for you guys, because suddenly, not only does your business model make sense now, but suddenly this could be saving a state. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, indeed, there's a tremendous amount of interest in Bakersfield in the whole Monterey formation. Because now ag and oil, the two biggest forces for industry in this state, are getting together and going, there's 75 billion gallons of water coming out of formations in places like Bakersfield that could be easily reused, providing they don't have too much salt, which a lot of them don't, that they could actually end up irrigating crops. And this is found water. I mean, this is not water that's regulated. It's relatively cheap, much cheaper than the water being pumped out of the ocean for San Diego. So it's a lot of fascination in it. And in fact, that's why there's so much excitement right now in the results we have announced this week for our process. And there's some wonderful backup quotes from our partners up there. They just think this is wonderful stuff.
Well, let's talk about that, because and that goes directly into your press release that came out. Is that, of course, we have a tragic water shortage in California, which is probably the most serious it's been in a long time. I mean, we essentially here in the South, SoCal they call it, and LoCal, we live in a desert over here. But even worse than that, our entire Central Valley, the ag culture, has suffered a serious drought for many, many years. And as you just used two words here that I haven't heard before, but this is music to the ears of many farmers, and I guarantee you many legislatures. That's called found water. Talk about that. And this has to be the tip of the iceberg, no pun intended.
Right. There's a huge amount of water to be reclaimed, for reuse, and that's probably it's expensive, but we have California passed Proposition 1, which allocates billions of dollars to water, and specifically almost $1 billion to reclamation alone. So we can find all this water that's being thrown away, going down the LA River and going to the ocean, things like that. But more importantly, for our point, is that all these oil wells gush fresh water from deep below the aquifer. And the whole state is subject to these allocations, and I had my water in 1890, and I'm holding on to it.
Well, they say whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting, and that's exactly what you're talking about there.
That's right.
I want you to bring up something that you brought up a long, long time ago. I think the very first time you were ever on the program, and I think this resonates. I think many people need to hear this, is that the oil industry is more about water than oil, correct?
Because the sheer quantity of water, my dad once said, Coca-Cola, that's not a drink company, it's a transportation company, So the same thing is that it's kind of sort of counterintuitive. The oil industry is really trying to manage vast amounts of water and get oil in the process, which means they're really, really interested in how to get crude pulled out of, a 10-to-1 ratio of water to oil. It's a well-known ratio, and they wrestle with it all the time. And that's our technology that does it. We were able to announce this week that up at our Vaquero site in Bakersfield, we got levels as low as non-detectable for most of the contaminants in that water.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's the press release. And let me read the headline. OriginOil successfully treats produced water for reuse in enhanced oil recovery. That's exactly what we've been talking about all day today. So talk about specifically what that means, because I'm reading some scientific language here that I want to make sure I understand. Turbidity reduced by 99%, suspended solids reduced by 97%, recoverable petroleum hydrocarbons reduced by 97%. What do those three things mean to the average Johnny Lunch Bucket?
Well, they basically mean this is what prevents water from being clear. Okay, it's the cloudiness or the haze in water, turbidity or suspended solids. And of course, the oils, the recoverable petroleum hydrocarbons, that's actually a money number. That means that actual petroleum can be sold if it's pulled out. So these are things that darken the water, that keep it from being clear, and that clog the downstream membranes and filters that are used for, let's say, making it potable, for example, or making it irrigation quality. So this is critical that you can get this far with just our process, with a couple filters upstream and downstream, and we have what we call the prime package.
Riggs, something I don't think we've talked about for a long time. What happens to all this water? So let's say you recover all this water. For example, the press release out, and if easy way to get the press release is go look up the stock symbol OOIL and then look for the news. It's right there. These independent lab results validating all the performance, validating the feasibility. What happens to all this water? I mean, is this water can be shipped out? Is this ag water now? Is it gray water? What do we use this for?
The most immediate use for the water is right there in the well in something called cyclic steam stimulation. And I know that
wow, I think we are all glad that Russ is not here right now.
Exactly.
Well, you know what? Because that'd be the end of the show. So what? So say that again.
Cyclic steam. You're generating steam to stimulate the well. You're sending it downhole to warm up and liquefy the petroleum so it'll flow better. And what you need to do is take your water, your produced water that's coming out of the well, clean it up enough so it doesn't gunk up your well, and generate steam with it. So that's called CSS. The site where we are, that's what they do with that fresh water. It can also be used eventually as irrigation water, perhaps some additional cleanup. But this stuff is pretty darn clean. It might still have some odor, and it certainly has dissolved solids, the stuff that you can't see. Mm-hmm. But that's relatively easy to handle if you've got the visible stuff out.
It's interesting too, and I want to talk about the wastewater side next week, because obviously you have a delicate job of balancing those three verticals that you have. Of course, the petro, the faster, more cost-effective water reuse, the algae, the high-speed harvesting of probably the most valuable water crop, and then of course the waste, removing contaminant and bacteria from wastewater. It's time for us to figure out how you actually juggle those all three things around. Riggs, we'll talk to you next week. I appreciate it. Riggs Eckelberry, Origin Oil, OriginOil.com, breakthrough water cleanup technology for our most precious resource, and that's water. He's the blue guy. You're going to hear more about Riggs being the blue guy very shortly. Not just his jacket and his logo.